Good afternoon. Welcome to the second program of the Taubman webinar series. We're very happy that everybody's been able to join us here in person and online. My name is Lonny Rossman. I will be moderating this afternoon's program. I am a licensed architect and managing principal with API Partners. Our focus is executive search and strategic consulting for the built environment. And we've partnered with Taubman to put together a series of programs and initiatives focused on career development and business. We've convened an esteemed panel of Taubman College architecture and planning alumni to discuss recruiting and retention success strategies this afternoon. Our program will start with the panelists telling us a little bit about themselves, and as we move through the program, we'll culminate in an interactive discussion about the future of recruiting and retention, taking into account the evolving workforce, changing communication methods, and new technology. We also have many Taubman alumni that are joining us online via the Blue Jeans app. We encourage you to participate. We'll be monitoring questions that you provide to us, and we'll be inputting those into the program as we receive them. We have a pretty ambitious program this afternoon, so I'd like to introduce the panel. First, we have Gordon Carrier, FAIA, Principal of Carrier Johnson and Culture out of San Diego, Master of Architecture graduate. Amy Gilbertson, AIA Principal at Trivers out of St. Louis, also Master of Architecture graduate, and Matt Carpenter, CEO of the Arbor Area Transportation Authority, Masters of Urban Planning graduate of the college. I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little about your background and experience.
Hi, I'm Amy Gilbertson. So like he said, I'm from St. Louis, so I moved there after I graduated from Michigan in 2001 and have stayed. So I'm a principal of a 28-person firm. We do civic work, hospitality, housing, and education. Those are our primary focus areas, about 50% historic renovation, 50% ground up. But I really am passionate about this topic, so I'm really excited to talk about it today. And then just personally, I've got 5 kids at home, so I'm managing a firm and managing a family, and I also teach a professional practice class at Washington University. So.
I don't know how you follow that. My name is Matt Carpenter. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Arbor Area Transportation Authority, which is the public transit agency here in Greater Ann Arbor. I'm a graduate from the Masters of Urban Planning program in 2003. After that, I went into consulting, moved to Toronto, worked for a firm called the IBI Group, did a number of mass transit projects throughout the United States, Canada, and the Middle East. Very good experience if you have that sort of opportunity. Moved back into management in 2007, started running transit agencies, and in 2015 I had the opportunity to come back to Ann Arbor to work here running the local transit agency. As the Chief Executive Officer, I'm very lucky to have a human resources manager, but together she and I are responsible for the recruitment retention of about 300 people. We're considered a mid-size or small transit agency. They can get as large as 10 or 15,000 employees. So on this panel, I guess I represent the urban planning side of it and the public sector side of it and the perhaps larger firm side of it.
Thank you. My name is Gordon Carrier. I'm a design principal with Carrier Johnson Culture out of San Diego. We have offices in San Diego, Los Angeles, Seattle, and New York. We have about 110 people on staff, and our practice really is, I would call it an urban practice, meaning most of the work we do is centered in urban environments, whether it be dense urban environments or emerging redevelopment environments. I love design, and I love our staff. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. They make me vital every day, and part of that is what we believe to be the retention strategy with our firm. So thanks for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. We had a few extensive discussions with the panel in advance of today's program, and From our research and conversations, it's clear that the recruiting and retention and other business practices really overlap. One of the business scenarios that we talked about with Gordon in particular was about ownership and leadership transition in his practice, and he'll elaborate on that as well, and how that really folds in with the discussion about recruiting and retention. At the most basic level, what we're really discussing here today is, why employees join companies, why they stay, and also why they leave. So to start out, the first topic we want to talk about was motivation, and specifically necessity. There were situations in both Amy and Gordon's scenarios where some of the retention practices that they started to employ in their organizations were born out of necessity. So if you wouldn't mind elaborating.
So as I was thinking about why people leave and why they stay, I mean, I feel like I know why I left my firm. So I originally started as an intern at Trivers. I left after 6 years, and I was at another firm for 8 years, which I left, and then came back to Trivers. So why did I leave and why did I come back? I think people stay when they feel challenged, when they feel appreciated, and when they like what they're doing and the people they're doing it with. So all the opposites of all those things are why people leave. If they don't like what they're doing, they don't like the people they're working with, they don't feel appreciated, and they don't feel challenged. So for us, when I came back to Trivers, I was very excited. It was a time I came back to help with the ownership transition from the original founder who had started the firm in the 70s. And I was very excited, motivated. I came back, and within the first 6 months that I was there, 9 people quit. And like I said, we were about 28 people, so that was about a third of our workforce. So our focus on recruitment and retention really came from that. We knew that we had to make it an extremely high priority and something to put a lot of attention toward. And there are certain reasons that people leave that we can't have any say in. So for family reasons, or they leave the profession maybe, or they want to do a type of architecture that we don't do, but we could focus on making people feel appreciated and challenged, and helping to build our culture. So
I think in our office, the idea of ownership can have a variety of terminologies, I think, or definitions. Ownership in the sense of owning stock is one thing in an organization, but I think ownership for us is about owning what you do and knowing that you have authority and responsibility to act on that ownership. We'll talk also about literal ownership here in a little while, which we have in our office as well. But I think for us, the idea that somebody can and should be a leader in the office has nothing to do with how old they are. It has really to do with what kind of freedom they're given to sort of run their own path, with us keeping our experienced arms around them in the process. You can't let them run free. And I think that motivates, it was something we felt allowed the firm to grow, because otherwise you're limited to your most senior people as the critical mass of your talent base. And so for us, it was important to make everybody part of the talent base, and that everybody has that opportunity, and we found that to be necessary.
Great points. What I think I can add is the idea of a cultural transition within a larger organization. Twice I've come in as an executive role to find an organization that was struggling for a variety of reasons, and rebooting the culture in a larger organization where you have, yes, professionals, lots of urban planners, sorry, no architects, love you, but don't employ any, a unionized workforce, bus drivers, mechanics, a pretty broad and complex internal stakeholder group, getting consensus and buy-in to become a culture that's driven by excellence, a culture that's driven by customer service, where everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction, isn't as easy as snapping your fingers, particularly when you have to pivot away from old habits and old ways of doing things. So rebooting the culture, bringing everyone along. Just yesterday I was sitting down with the head of our union. You know, it's us and management on one side and the union on the other side, and they wanted to talk to us about these core values that we've started printing out in draft form and leaving around on the tables. What's that all about? Are you going to use it to fire us? Well, excellence is a core value. No, we're not going to fire you, but we would like to talk about how do we all achieve excellence in our various spheres, whether that's in the urban planning realm or you're turning a wrench, keeping the wheels on the bus, literally. So rebooting the culture and turning around larger organizations. Very similar, I think, in some ways.
I know in our discussions we talked about professional development and how that's played a part in keeping the talent that you have and helping people grow within the organization and formalizing programs internally to elevate talent in an organization, give them more responsibility. How have you formalized those programs in your organizations, and what kind of results have you seen on retention?
I'll start because I already have the microphone. So we've actually started the RIDE University, a little internal series of courses, call them in continuing education if you want, centered around team building, change management, and leadership training. We're trying to build a leadership culture, as we call it, where everyone can lead from any part of the organization, regardless of your title, and empowering people to do that. So there's actually a series of 3 courses, one starting with sort of basic team building, relying on self-awareness and getting to know each other. And you can see these are not based on particular skill sets so much as it is basic communication, interpersonal skills, things like that. Once a year, we bring in a change management trainer just to talk about how everyone deals with change a little bit differently, but there's value in each perception. And then once a year, we have a sort of in-depth 2-day leadership training course that really focuses with all folks, including our union leadership. We've started to bring them into it as well. So it's a defined course. It's been growing and expanding as we go along. We also do support continuing education and tuition reimbursement as well.
So I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but when I was an emerging professional, there was this phenomenon of some people got to go to the AIA convention, and it was never me. So how did they get to go, and how did they get chosen? Were they just in the right place at the right time? And so that is not good for culture, obviously. And so we wanted to put in place something that was very objective and obtainable. Also, so that people could pursue their own passions when they're excited about what they're learning, then they're bringing that back to the firm. It makes us all better. They can share what they're learning. And so we implemented a system where, depending on your level in the firm, if you're an emerging professional or if you're a project manager, you have a certain budget, and you can spend your budget however you want. You can submit to us. So we had someone go to the Mass Timber Conference, we had someone go to ULI, someone else went to Greenbuild. And so we're bringing back all this information, and everyone is required to do 24 hours of professional development that we give them time to do. So at the end of the year, it's not, oh, I didn't have time to do it. We want everyone advancing themselves every year. And so that's been a really great way for people to take their own initiative to find their own professional development, and it can be on leadership training or how to be a great speaker. It doesn't have to be directly related to architecture, but they have to tell us why they want to take it and how they feel it'll help them professionally. And so far, it's been really great. And we're finding out about all kinds of conferences that as firm leaders, we would have never heard about. So
I think in our office, what we realized is we weren't probably being consistent as a leadership. And one of the things we realized about leading was that you need to give people a chance to know that you care about them enough to be consistent with reviewing who they are and what they intend to achieve every year, like clockwork. And we found ourselves intermittently doing so. We brought a person in to lead the firm who was a business person. And this business person put together a structure that allows us to meet with every staff person twice a year, actually. Once a year to set the goal, and then midway through the year to check the goal. And the end of the year is, of course, the next review. But what happens is goals are set in the areas of professional development. They're set by the individual, not by us. In the areas of communication skills, because we believe one of the sorely lacking skills in the architectural profession is the ability to communicate articulately in an audience, because that's how we communicate ideas. And areas that emphasize your ability to understand the profession of design better in whatever fashion you may deem interesting to yourself. What happens is each of those goals then are actually given financial results, meaning if the goal is achieved and we know it's measurable, that's key, it has to be measurable. It's a measurable goal that we can all understand was achieved, and there's a financial reward that comes with it as an agreement that we are going to move forward to advance our career skills.
One of the other topics we talked about was career development. We just talked about professional development, elevating, the experience in education, but I know that with Gordon there was a transition to an ESOP, at least partially ESOP structure, and Amy moved into an ownership situation when she moved back to Trivers. So how do you kind of infuse career development and clarifying clear career pathways for individuals in your organizations separate from professional development?
Well, we have actually had a lot of discussions about that and finding ways for people to develop leadership no matter what stage they're at in their careers. And so we've implemented conversation about this model where you can be a leadership coach in something that you're passionate about. So, for example, the person who went to the Mass Timber Conference, if they start getting really involved in that, then any project that involves that construction type, they would be an advisor on, or they would participate in the charrettes. We also have the more traditional associate level leadership, and the associate pool is where we will draw from for our next principles. But we really wanted the associate title to mean something. There's a lot of firms where if you ask someone, oh, you're an associate, what does that mean? There isn't really an answer other than maybe you've been there a certain amount of time or something like that. So our associate group really has participation in our marketing process, which projects we're going after. If they are to be the future principal leaders of the firm, we want to make sure we're creating a firm that they want to be a part of.
I'll add to what I said before. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of chances and opportunities to develop technical skills, and there are a variety of ways to do that: webinars, seminars, conferences, continuing education. Communication is a great example of a skill. It's hard to take a class in communication. There's very few masters of that. So we work through a coaching setup. It sounds like we're following the same road Gordon's firm used, of every year having a set of goals and then checking in along the way to make sure it's going well. And then, I found sitting down with my direct reports, just on a personal level, understanding what their aspirations are. Where do you want to go? What do you want to be in the next phase of your career? And if there's a guidance or advice that can be given, we try to do that. I recently had an unexpected one where we had a very capable and ambitious urban planner working for us. And one of the natures of, unfortunately, large hierarchical organizations, that it's a bit of a slow-moving ladder if you want career progression. Until somebody retires, how do you move up? And so, I pointed out to him, he has tremendous skills on an urban planning side of things that would be very valuable in any municipal setting, not just in a transportation agency. And he came back a couple months later, and I didn't realize, but I was really happy for him. He said, I've been interviewing, and I've gotten some job offers to be a city manager for smaller communities in the Upper Peninsula. And I was incredibly happy for him. And we consider something like that to be, you're an alumni of our agency now, and there's never any hurt feelings or bad blood. Sometimes people need to take that lateral to go find, to pursue their passion. And so I think he's just moved up, and from the sounds of it, he's doing great in his first month on the job. So sometimes when people leave, they'll boomerang back. And even if they don't, the reputation that they take with them from having worked in a good organization follows. And it's like an alumni network for the firm.
Well, in our office, I talked a little earlier about this idea or definition of ownership, that ownership can be either self-fulfilling ownership or it can actually be real ownership. And in our office, we determined about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, that we would begin to transition the firm, and we sold 48% of the firm, my partner and I, to an employee stock option plan, which automatically makes anybody who walks in the door at our office an owner of real stock that is worth the same thing my stock is worth any day of any week. What happens is you are given that stock as part of an account for you that you fully earn to 100% value over a 7-year vesting period. Selfishly, what that means in some ways is that we know people will likely want to stay with the firm over that 7-year period to enjoy the benefit of that. Really, it's a retirement account that they've not had to pay for. That's been very valuable, but the bigger part of it is it's allowed us to actually have a discussion with very talented design players about the idea that it is actually also a business. And we don't often think about architecture in architectural school as a business because we're in love with what we do, rightfully so. But ultimately, people who are going to succeed, even if they're people who leave my office and compete with me, need to know how to run a business so that I know the competitors we're dealing with are worthy and that the people inside the office also understand how the firm works. So the ESOP has us audited every year. The auditors are in my office right now, by the way. Audited every year, which is not that much fun, but that's an aside. And it assures that the value of what's placed on the company has been negotiated by a third party, not us. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I have to say we have not done a great job yet allowing people to understand exactly the high value that the ESOP creates because it's still pretty young. But that will happen, we hope, over time.
As you talk about career development and career pathways in your organizations, have you found that there's any difference in different generations, millennials versus other generations of architects or planners in your organizations that are either more patient with assuming leadership roles over time or ownership over time or want things to happen faster? Have you seen a difference for individuals may have 10 or 20 or 30 years of experience in the profession?
Based on personal experience, I think it is whoever's youngest always wants the older person out of the way, as a joke. Millennials get bashed a lot, and I can certainly see some that we interview for positions, okay, maybe there's a hint of impatience there. We were joking ahead that yes, when you apply for a job, you should take the incriminating pictures off your Facebook post. The keg stand's not going to play well in the job interview. But I'm pretty sure I was a snot-nosed punk Gen X kid a few years ago. So we cut them some slack as they're coming up. And I really haven't noticed a huge difference generationally other than the young are always young and ambitious. And the older folks like myself with a mortgage and kids, we're sort of settled into, okay, we've done this a few times. We understand that this will take a few years to get whatever this project or initiative is done. We got to let it sort of follow its course.
I would say it's more personality-based than age-based. We have a lot of emerging professionals on our team who take a lot of initiative. They're okay presenting their ideas and coming forward with ideas on how we could make our firm better. And we have a lot of emerging professionals, project architects, and frankly, project managers who need more support. They need us helping them see their value, helping them realize what they're really good at, and putting them in the right positions where they can be successful. So I feel like that's a lot of what our job is looking at our teams and figuring out what is it that they're really great at, what do they need in order to be successful, and then the leadership just comes from that. So we have quite a number of project managers who have no ambitions to be an owner. They just want to be a really great project manager, and that's fine. We have other emerging professionals who already want to know, how do I get there? And that's fine too. We can work with that. But I think it varies vastly per person. And so just really recognizing how to deal with each individual on their level with what they need is what's been important for us.
We've had occasion when a younger person in the office straight out of school had ambitions that maybe didn't fit their experience level. That's actually, I think, kind of rare. I think what we have found is that immersion is the great healer, meaning if you sink somebody deeply into a problem that they better know how to solve, all of the talk seems to go away pretty quickly. In our office, we let very young people have strong, high-level responsibility, but we also put our arms around them with experience, knowing full well that there's a great amount of information they just could not possibly know. That doesn't make them any less talented. It just means they don't have as many gray hairs as I have. So this idea, when I got out of school, I was put in places, maybe some of you were the similar, where it wasn't wrong, it was just the way it was done. You spent a lot of time doing very menial things. In fact, you were doing component things, not comprehensive things, which meant I could solve a roof detail in a New York second, but I really didn't know where it went in the building. So what we're trying to do in our office is immerse people in what the holistic idea of architecture is about, and then help save you if indeed you get over your head. And it's a great collaboration. It's a lot of fun.
I think one of the common threads that we've heard throughout your responses so far has been communication. We're talking about the leadership communicating with the staff and having open lines of communication. How has that played into employee engagement and to retention?
So yes, certainly communication is very critical. We implemented monthly company meetings, and we try to be as transparent as we feel people can handle. There's a certain part of the business that not everybody wants to be a part of or wants to be into the weeds on the details, but we certainly talk about what projects are we going after. We talk about our strategy and long-term vision as a firm. Where are we going together? Why did we decide not to pursue this one over that one? We also, I mean, I'll echo your thoughts on the reviews. I think they're critical. I remember begging for a review in one of the jobs that I had, and it was supposed to happen in December, and it's March. And most people want to get better, and they want the feedback, and it's our job to give them the feedback they need to get better. So we have more of an informal mid-year review, and that's really up to each team member to come to the meeting with their own questions, their own ideas about their goals. We do check in on their year-end goals also. We check in on their professional development, and that's the time to remind them you've got 6 more months to get it done. And then also the year-end reviews, which are much more formal. We do a 360 review, so we email everybody in the office who's worked with the person, and it's anonymous. They give the feedback to our operations administrator. She pulls it all together. The 3 principals spend a lot of time looking at the feedback from peers and really thinking about what we think that person's goals should be for the next year, what their strengths are. And we do the same. Everyone gives anonymous feedback to us because we still want to get better. We still need to get better. And so we have our own year-end review with each other where it's great because we really respect each other, so we can be very truthful about what we need to work on, and we all want each of us to get better. And so we have some really awesome conversations at the beginning of the year looking at that peer review feedback and also reviewing each other.
I'll talk about sort of a corporate strategy and more of a personal one. So we have, with 300 staff, 3 divisions and 10 departments. So siloing is an inherent risk that each group can kind of get down their own rabbit hole. and forget to talk to the other groups. And absolutely, it's a risk. And so beginning to break down the silos is something I think renewed effort recently on. I don't think it's ever really a completed project as people come and go, continuing to work on it. Sometimes purposefully creating cross-functional teams where the particular pressure point, and for an organization like ours as a service delivery one, we'll have our planning department, which is kind of like architectures. They design the service, and we have operations, which delivers it, so maybe construction. Imagine having both groups in one organization. They don't always agree, believe it or not. And if something goes wrong, was it bad execution or faulty design? I know this never happens in architecture. And so having purposefully meetings where, no, we're all going to sit together and go through this scope until we're all on the same page about what this means, and support each other, having communication back and forth. And what I'm really happy about recently in our cultural transition is the emergence of people willing to be vulnerable in those meetings and say, I'm struggling to understand this, rather than just you're wrong. And so that's where it kind of gets into sort of the personal development and trust that is inherent in any good team and can be difficult to maintain. And another example for us, you may be surprised, we had never asked our bus drivers, what would you like in a bus before we start buying them? This is their workspace. They're there for 8 hours a day. You'd think they would have a good idea about how it should be designed. We hadn't done it before, and so we've started doing it. And I had a bus driver come into my office the other day, just sort of burst in, so happy about the model that we had on the floor, just to show them and get some feedback from it. She'd never been asked before in 15 years. So little things can really make a difference.
For us, we're a pretty flat organization, meaning I kiddingly tell my partner if I could get rid of all the titles in the office, I would do it. But some people love titles for reasons that are their own. So we've not yet done that. I'm going to keep pushing for that. We've never had a closed office in the office for 42 years. And the reason for that is I just don't think people should be in offices behind a door, because it sends a certain message. So we have a completely open studio. My desk is open to the studio. And I spend all my time wandering around the studio, frankly, talking with people. When I talk about communication, what we decided to do is make sure that the youngest of the young or the oldest of the old are actually presenting their projects regularly. So every Monday morning at 10 a.m., we have something we call Design Chat, which is just the person who is leading the team with both the technical and the design side of the team is presenting the project. It's done for a couple of reasons. To clarify concept, really, that's its purpose, is to find out whether from a design point of view we're on track. But it's also to clarify their ability to communicate. So we don't do it there, but after the session, whomever as a principal might have been there pulls that person aside and said, gee, that was really great. I'd like to have you think about a couple things as you speak, because they don't come out as clearly as they might. I've got one very talented guy in the office who uses the word kinda all the time. Kinda this and kinda that and kinda this. And he just doesn't know it, right? So it gives you an opportunity to have a quiet conversation with them where they realize you really care about how they improve somehow by addressing it, but just not doing it publicly.
One of the things that we learned is that it could be larger communication initiatives that you put together, but also smaller initiatives as well. And Amy, before we jump onto the next topic, there were onboarding and even some of the charrettes, but onboarding in particular, you had mentioned that during our prior conversation, and just engaging a new employee day one and how that makes them feel about the firm and how that really sends a message moving forward. Could you elaborate?
Sure, I forgot about that. So yeah, again, probably all of us have had that awkward first day where you get there and you're not sure what to do and you're given some paperwork, but it doesn't take very much time. And so we spend all this time recruiting somebody, no matter what the position is. We've put time into it and effort to get them there. And so their first day should be fantastic. So we really put a lot of attention into that first day. So they get an agenda. They do We have mentorship groups in the office, so before they arrive, I'm the one who gets to choose what mentorship group they're in, and so someone from their group takes them around the office and introduces them. Then, of course, they do have a little bit of paperwork stuff. Someone else walks them through the computer things, but then immediately they're also engaged in a project team meeting. So usually they start on Mondays, and we always have project team meetings on Mondays. So whatever project they're assigned to initially, they'll immediately meet with that team, hear about the project, hear about what their role in the project is going to be. And every new employee also, one of the principals will take them out to lunch on their first day, because that's also awkward. Do I bring my lunch? Do I go out to lunch? Is anybody going to ask me? And so they get their agenda before they even arrive, so they know they don't have to worry about that. And they have, with the mentorship group person, then they have someone who might not be on their project teams, but that can be their go-to person for questions like, where do you park, or where's a good place to walk to lunch, or something like that.
Perfect segue to the mentoring.
Okay.
How has mentoring been formalized, or maybe it's more informal in your organizations, and how has that played a part in engaging employees and making them want to stay and grow with the organization?
Sure. So we actually, in our year-end reviews, we also look at them after they're done and try to see if there were any common themes. And that's an area that we can then focus on as the leaders of the firm improving. And one of the topics that came up was mentorship a couple of years ago. So we developed groups. Each principal, there are 3 principals, so each principal has 2 mentorship groups, and we tried to put the teams together in terms of level of experience, and hopefully people that don't actually normally work on projects together or haven't yet worked on projects together. So another way for people to get to know each other and ask questions about projects or the profession in general, or talk about the firm. And then we also have peer-level mentorship groups. So our emerging professionals meet once a month and talk about test taking, and they go to construction site visits, and they kind of have a peer group. Same with our project architects and our project managers, because they're the ones who can best tell us how we can improve what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And so those groups also meet once a month.
I've never had the privilege of working in a place that had a formalized mentoring program, but I do see a lot of what I'll call sort of micro-mentorship or sort of ad hoc relationships come together, and sometimes it happens in a sort of informal basis. The gentleman I mentioned before, who has gone on to be a city manager using his urban planning skills, didn't report to me. I was, I think, 2 layers down in the organization, but was very interested in the executive role and what it was like working with a board and elected officials, and was very eager. So I would make time for him, even though he was not my direct report, not in my division per se. He was eager, and I recognized in him a lot of potential. So let's foster that to the degree we can. I've also learned a lot. I have a board of directors that I report to here in town, and my chairman is a very a type A gentleman. He's a trial attorney. So if you've ever been sued, you know what I'm talking about. But I've actually learned a lot from him, and I would consider him another one of my micro-mentors in learning different ways to handle different types of situations, particularly on a negotiating basis, that I hadn't had a whole lot of experience with prior.
And as I pass it back, I'm going to add one thing that I forgot. We have always had a mentorship program in our handbook that was voluntary, and not one single person ever did it. I mean, you go to lunch or something, but we kept saying, well, we have it. So that's why we made it more formal, and the principals set up the meetings with the groups so that we know that it happens.
I can't say that we have a formal mentorship program. I think we're an organization that believes in the notion of collaboration, which means most of us are in a room, or a collection of people are in the room at the same time. That could be a financial conversation, because we're completely transparent because of the ESOP with financials, but moreover, just the practice, the design side of what we do is about a lot of voices always weighing in on something. And yeah, there are some more experienced than others, but none probably any less valuable if a great idea pops out of that. So what we did do is we actually did assign senior players to specific people in the office who we felt could use the help. So there actually is a name attached to another name who's responsible to stay in touch with that person. But for us as a leadership, talking less is actually our best friend, and letting the younger folks talk more so that you can understand what it is they're saying and whether or not what they're saying is what they should be saying. Because we can tell them all day long what to do, but until we've heard them actually do it, we don't really know whether it has taken. The opposite of that is shadowing people to client meetings, where younger people do trail me or other principals to the meeting. And in those meetings, of course, we do have a leadership role, and they are able to listen to sort of the client management side of how things happen, or project management side of things may happen. They can participate, no doubt, but they're probably not leading those as much until we know they're in a position experientially to benefit. So we probably should have a more formal program, but I think most of it is about making sure that there's at least 3 people talking about something almost all the time. It's more fun too.
Thank you. One final topic under the heading of retention before we move on to recruiting. Work-life balance. How has that come into the culture in your organizations, and have you seen an impact, a positive impact for maybe some programs that you've implemented?
Yes. I think it's critically important, and something, obviously, with 5 kids, that is important to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to practice. And also, one of the reasons I left this job the first time around, I had my daughter, and it didn't work anymore. What I needed to do and the expectations that were placed on me at the firm at the time didn't fit. But it's not just women with families. It's anyone who has any other interest other than your 8 to 5 job, who, if you can help support people's other interests, they're happier, and hopefully they stick around. So I think it's definitely important to retention. So a couple of the things we've done, we have recently implemented a flex time program, but it's a little different. People can choose a 4-hour block of time. It can't be Monday morning, and it can't be Friday afternoon, but it has to be the same time every week. So it can be Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, and so on. And for those 4 hours, it's not that they're working elsewhere. They're working nowhere. They're doing whatever they want to do. They're with their kids, they're grocery shopping, they're sleeping in. It doesn't matter. And then we trust them to make up those 4 hours at whatever point during the week makes the most sense for them. In addition to that, we don't do comp time, but any time under 4 hours for a doctor's appointment or whatever can be made up throughout the week. So every week can be pretty different and pretty flexible. If you want to go to your kid's birthday party at school at 2 o'clock or something, or you have a dentist appointment, or there's a great bike ride, or it's a good day for a run, whatever it is, you can kind of work around that. And so we have now, I think it's definitely, we had 6 people have babies, and again, we're a 28-person firm. So I was the first architect to have a baby at Trivers before I left the first time. And so last year we had 6 people have babies, and they all came back, and they're all managing really well, and they're doing great, and they're successful. And so I feel like, and I hope that we keep getting more flexible. So we just keep taking baby steps towards more and more flexibility, but we still need to be together to work on projects. So it's kind of trying to balance that.
I'd say the work-life balance and retention are very important, in part because if you burn people out, they may leave, but sometimes it's worse if they stay. And it can create a very toxic environment where the organization slips further into a sort of dysfunctional malaise. As an example, in Ann Arbor, when I first got here a few years ago, the board handed me the work plan for that year. It had 157 items on it. there was no prioritization, there was no goal setting, there was no focus. And so staff were running from one fire to another, and not surprisingly working extraordinarily long hours, not getting time off, not being able to take a break. So a big part of rebooting our culture has been pulling the whole corporate political impulse of doing too much, pulling back on that to, okay, what can we actually handle? What can our workforce actually accomplish? We've gone from 157 to 3 buckets. And I think there's maybe 10 in each bucket. And it's broken up by each department and division, and they know who's doing what. Sometimes we'll have to go so far as to organize Gantt chart about, for this 50-person effort, who's doing what, when is it occurring. But it all helps to organize a large, cumbersome, complex operation so that things happen a little bit more like clockwork, so that people can go home and they don't have to put in extraordinary hours and nobody has to play the hero. So it's a different way of reverse engineering your culture and work stream to improve retention by avoiding burnout.
Our office is organized on a 4.5-day work week. So we have 9-hour days, Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 5:30, and then Friday is 7:30 to 11:30. And the reason for that is we think people should be home on the weekend, enjoying their weekend. Having said that, a lot of people are there many more hours and on weekends and nights, but they're there because they want to be, not because we told them to be. And I think, so what we've really done in the office is say, look, we have a project that has the following scope attached to it. Your role in this project is X, whatever it may be. You understand full well what X means, and our expectation of you is that X will get done. And if that means you're not here Monday and Tuesday, that's up to you. But if it's due on Monday of the following week, we would expect that it's done. And that sounds a little loose, but it's true. And we may have 25 different schedules going on in our office of people who have personal needs, they have things they need to do, young mothers or people who have other obligations. And we just feel it's up to them to decide what will work for them. Now, we still have to have meetings that we can trust will happen, so they're set in times when we know everybody would be there, midday or so. But most of the schedules are really maintained by the individual within reason. I mean, it's not off the charts crazy, but and what we find is if you give people a lot of responsibility and they understand full well that their future in the office is dependent upon their ability to take the responsibility and fulfill it, they do the right thing. It's kind of cool.
I know we've got about 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to jump over to recruiting before we take some questions. Despite all of the wonderful initiatives that the three of you have talked about related to retention, there are needs that come up, whether it's strategic growth or attrition or just market expansion, opening new offices that you need to recruit. Sometimes you'll do that through internal referrals. It could be external recruiting or merger and acquisition. But there are things that you need to do to identify new talent and bring new talent in. Just wanted to talk for a few minutes about some approaches or strategies that you found to be successful in your organizations to identify and bring in new talent, whether for emerging or leadership positions.
So I was joking, but not joking, that part of what I'm doing here is recruiting. So being on this panel, we are a small firm in the Midwest, so not a lot of people have heard about us. So the more that we can be out there and engaging with our alumni communities, the better. We want to have a really diverse talent pool, and that means also diverse education backgrounds. So it might be really easy for us to hire all of our professionals as graduates from Washington University because they're right there, but that's not adding to our diversity of thought or training. And so we really are trying to think more broadly, engage with our alumni groups more proactively, I guess, and with more intention. And then once we have somebody that we've identified as a really great candidate, then it's kind of, pull out all the stops. Does anybody know this person? Can you call them? Can they ask you questions? And really putting the effort into getting those right people once we've found them, having as many conversations as it takes to get them comfortable, to get us comfortable, to make sure it's the right fit, because it's really detrimental also at a small firm if you bring in someone who's the wrong fit. So we put a lot of effort into it, and I think it's been successful so far.
We also do a lot in terms of screening, but I also think positioning of the firm is important in terms of making ourselves as attractive as possible to the highest quality candidates we can. We're selling ourselves, in part, is how we see that. In our industry, when we're looking at folks who are very experienced, one of the nuances for us is that if there's only one transit agency in each city, and you need to bring in someone from the outside, if you can't promote from within, you're probably bringing someone in from another city or another part of the country. So we have employed for very senior positions headhunters. Most of our senior management team now is from out of town. And you got to put yourself out there sometimes. I met my chief financial officer at a transit industry conference in Los Angeles when I went to the LGBT mixer, and I'm married with kids right now, so I was going there primarily because it was frankly the more interesting party at the conference, but also I knew, because I had read the list ahead of time about this guy, but my headhunter said, this is somebody you should meet, and he goes to these, you should go to these, so I went there, had a great time, it was wonderful. So you really got to put yourself out there and sell your company as much as anything else.
I think for us, part of the recruiting process starts with what people's perception of the firm may be, meaning that if it is perceived to be a culture of acceptance and opportunity and a place somebody wants to be, we find people have an affinity to maybe want to be there. And so the culture makes all the difference, I think, in our ability to have a reasonable recruiting conversation with anybody. Beyond that, I would say we're a firm that basically goes to the people we love the most inside the firm and say, hey, who looks just like you out in the marketplace, because you're spectacular. And generally those people hang with people that do look a lot like them. Because they want to be around people who resemble the qualities that they resemble. And that's actually been very successful, because some of the vetting has been done by the person who's already there, the staff person that you're sitting beside. We have done headhunter recruiting. I was telling when we met earlier, we haven't had great success there, probably because we don't know how to do it. We don't really know best how to use that process yet, so I'm sure that's still in the making for us. But friends know friends, and talent knows talent in a way. We use a lot of the schools. This school, we use a lot of the schools in Southern California as an outreach, so we're very involved with lecturing and the like in those schools, which I think is amazing. But that's a particular level of talent, so you have to recognize it's a great thing, but it also fits in a certain level of talent that you have to use a certain way. Other levels of talent may require people who have 10 years of experience telling you, hey, I know a girl who's awesome, and she's got about 12 years of experience and would be a great fit here. That is a great warm start, because in some ways, if I know this person is great, I know the person walking in the door is probably going to look a lot like them, right? So that's kind of how we've done it. Not particularly sophisticated process, but it's worked for us.
Just a few minutes to go, but I wanted to make sure we touched on diversity, and just a short response, but how has diversity played into your recruiting for your organization? I know, Amy, if you wouldn't mind elaborating about the balance of men and women in your firm.
50-50. I'm happy to report. Yeah, so it's vastly different from when I started in 2001, when I was one of 2 or 3 women out of the whole group, and at that time we were more than 30 people. So our design, and it's our design team that's 50-50 also. If you add in our few administrative people, it's even more than 50%. And I recently had a project, I told someone last night, we had to add a guy to our team to make it more diverse. So that was, yeah, so.
Thanks for remembering.
Right. Yeah, we want to add men to the team also. We want to continue being 50-50, that's the goal. But yeah, in terms of other types of diversity, like I mentioned, we do try to get people from other backgrounds, from other schools. We have non-native born team members, but there's also a lack of diversity in our profession as a whole. And so if you want a diverse workforce, then you have to be intentional about seeking out those possible team members, making their experience equitable in whatever way that means, and also reaching out to, we have a lot of team members who engage with charter schools in our community. I remember someone coming to my high school, to my calculus class, and saying, engineering is a possibility for you. And now there are a lot of women in engineering and architecture. And so I think now we're kind of starting that again with the more ethnically diverse groups and the people who might not see this as a possible profession. So it's going to be a long haul, but we feel an obligation to definitely participate and support that.
We have a philosophy of hiring the most suitable candidate, irregardless of what they look like or who they are, and I'm happy to say that has naturally resulted in a fairly diverse leadership team. If we have 10 departments, 10 department heads, only 2 of them are men. And then that's been a relatively recent changeover. Number of African Americans have joined in senior positions. We have a couple of members of the LGBT community as well. But there's no hint of tokenism, because everyone who's come up has come up pretty much knowing you were hired because you were the most suitable candidate. You knocked our socks off. That's why you're here. The rest of that's kind of immaterial. We're here to get some things done. We need the best people.
I think our office has always been more or less 50-50, I think, men to women, but I think the bigger diversity, well, California, Southern California, it's maybe in some ways, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it may be a little easier to gain diversity just because of the sheer numbers of people who are in that environment from all over the world. But out of the 110 people on staff, we have 19 countries represented, which I think is just fabulous. And more languages than that. We have 25 languages represented by those 19 countries. And it's just a fabulous conversation to have a team composed of people from all over the world when you can sit down and see their frame of reference being contributed to a design idea. It's just off the charts fun. So I can't say we have not been proactive about it really, but I think part of it is we have the grace of being in a place where it happens naturally perhaps, right? But it's fun, so yeah.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. I think we're at the end. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to field them, but I know that it may be offline at that point. Okay. Were there any that came online that you wanted to mention? None online. Okay.
What sort of incentives you're offering to recruit people? It's a tight market these days, right?
Yeah, so until recently, there wasn't an incentive because we thought, well, if we bring in good people, it's good for everyone, we'll do better work, we'll get better projects, so people should naturally want to help. However, we instituted a $1,000 bonus. If you recommend someone, you don't have to do anything more than give us a name. If we hire them, you get $1,000, and we are getting far more recommendations. So money talks, or at least it makes people think a little deeper about who do they know and who might be a good candidate. So we now have a hiring bonus.
We have, in rare cases, resorted to signing bonuses if necessary at a senior level. More likely, we rely on this is a place you can come and make a real difference, particularly if you're interested and you have a passion for what we do, which is mobility and helping people get to the destinations they need to get to. Being a public monopoly does have a usefulness there of being the only game in town, if that's what you're interested in. But signing bonuses have occurred.
We've had sort of an affinity to stay away from the money thing, both in capturing and keeping people and in recruiting them. And the reason for that, at least from our point of view, is I think if we're in that scenario as a mechanism to try to keep somebody, that conversation will happen again. Meaning if I need 10,000 because so-and-so firm is going to give me 10,000, we basically part with blessings, because it's a scenario that you sort of can't win. And for me, at least, it's not a philosophical attachment to the organization. It's a monetary attachment to the organization that I don't think behooves us or the person necessarily that well. The only incentives we've given probably have been about people who are in remote geographies who simply need help getting there, right? So if we hire somebody from New York, we wouldn't expect that they pick up lock, stock, and barrel and pay to move across the country just because they want to come work for us. So that is a scenario where I don't know if it's an incentive. It's probably just logic in a way. I don't know. But, well, I guess it's not out of their pocket, so maybe it is. But we don't really view it that way. But the salary thing, and by the way, we did this one time where a person came and sort of, I call it holding you hostage for some number. And we thought, oh my gosh, we can't survive without this guy. And we did it. And it was the litmus for me to realize that that's not the way to have somebody who's going to be endeared to your organization long term, but that's just a personal view.
Thank you very much.